All right, and here we go. Welcome into the Rocky Top Insider Instant Reaction Show. We are here on the field following the first game of the Knoxville Super Regional. Notre Dame takes the victory over Tennessee by a score of 8-6. Ryan, when you think about this game, man, there's a lot to it. The first thing that obviously comes to my head is Notre Dame's start at the beginning of the game. That obviously is what set them up for success and for the victory later in the game. What was your biggest takeaway from tonight's contest?
Biggest takeaway, I mean, there's a lot of them, but I think the way just Notre Dame punched Tennessee in the mouth those first couple innings has to be it.
Put it.
I mean, no one's done that to Tennessee this year. I mean, the really closest we had were those two games last week against Campbell and Georgia Tech, where Tennessee got down 4-0, and even that had a far different field than when the Will Mabry pitch got taken over the right field wall to give Notre Dame an 8-1 lead in the top of the fourth inning. It was the biggest deficit Tennessee's faced all year by 2 runs, and it really sucked the life out of Lindsey Nelson Stadium. And it was kind of the whole time. Notre Dame got off to a hot start. I guess they were up 5-0 and then 5-1 before that fourth inning. And even that, it felt like Tennessee can just get their pitching, get their feet under them. They're going to have a great chance to come back and win this game. And then that hit both, I believe, all the base runners got on with two outs, if I'm not mistaken, on that too. So 2-out rally, I believe a 2-out walk or maybe hit by pitch, and then the single out to left field. Seth Stevenson was almost able to make the play, and then it came back to backfire on him. So I think that was really set the tone for the game. And Tennessee, I don't know if I would say responded poorly. I mean, the pitching responded after that, the bullpen did, but they just didn't have enough to get back in it.
Sure. As I said a second ago, kind of a tale of two halves for Notre Dame. You see all of their runs coming in the first 4 innings of the game. Then you get to the middle point of the game, the 5th inning. Kind of walk me through your thought process when Drew Gilbert gets ejected after an at-bat at home plate. Frank Anderson, Tennessee's pitching coach, also comes out to have a conversation with the umpire too. He gets thrown out as well. So within a mere matter of seconds, not only had Drew Gilbert been out with, I believe, maybe a run or two on the bases as well, but then you have Drew Gilbert and Frank Anderson being ejected from the game, not going to be with Tennessee tomorrow. How big of a moment was this to you? How big of an impact did it have on the rest of the game? Because, I mean, when you look at it, it's not like Tennessee crumbled or anything after that. If anything, it kind of gave them a little bit of momentum. What did you think of just that whole situation? Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think it related to this game, it was a ton. I mean, it was kind of instantly when it happened, trying to figure out who got ejected for one. I mean, Drew Gilbert had his back turned to the umpire when he got ejected. I think he turned, said something to him, and I think said another thing when he turned his back to him. And Tony Vitello was kind of a step out of the dugout and really more than anything trying to calm Drew Gilbert down. Yeah. I think he said something to focus on next pitch. But the fact that he was out of the dugout and Gilbert was turned around, confusion about who got ejected, I could clearly tell Frank Anderson got ejected. I knew that was who that was. So that was kind of the first thoughts. And then, like you said, all right, what's the rule here? In the regular season, I knew that obviously we had the Vitello-Anderson ejection. Those were both one game suspensions for sure. And then Vitello got added extra. That was due to the case of him making contact with the umpire. So it was figuring out, was that an SEC rule in the regular season or was that an NCAA rule? How does that affect things? And it wasn't an NCAA rule. So Drew Gilbert, I think that's the biggest takeaway. Drew Gilbert, I'd say, has been Tennessee's best hitter down the stretch of this season. Will not be in the lineup tomorrow against Notre Dame. And then obviously Tennessee will be without Frank Anderson for what looks like 3 more games. So potentially the rest of the season, if not all the way into the first game of Omaha. So Tennessee played well. Or pitched well when Frank Anderson was suspended earlier in the season. I don't know if that's the end of the world, but certainly a guy that has a really good pulse on his pitchers. And those Frank Anderson mound visits are almost always beneficial. So Tennessee won't have that for a couple games or potentially the rest of the season, depending on how this weekend goes. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about just, press conferences or interviews that was even before the Knoxville Regional, right? Chase Dolander, Evan Russell, guys are just talking about how important and how vital Frank Anderson is to everybody on the roster. So I think that is fascinating and interesting to watch going forward. All right, before we get into a little bit moving on to tomorrow's game, any other kind of wrap-up thoughts from tonight? I mean, I know we really haven't even touched Tennessee scoring, what was this, 1, 2, 3, 4 runs in the final 4 frames of the game. Almost came back, did end up putting up 1 in the 9th inning there. Any other kind of final thoughts on Tennessee's game versus Notre Dame on Friday night?
Yeah, a couple. One, on the Frank Anderson subject, I'll use one of his lines. Solo home runs don't beat you. Solo home runs won't win you games. And then Tennessee learned that tonight. 3 solo home runs. Trey Lipscomb had the big 2-out hit, 3-2 pitch that scored a couple runs. But Tennessee, besides that, just dreadful with runners on base. Same problems they had against Georgia Tech. That was Tennessee's only hit with a runner on base. They ended up 1 of 16. So you're just not going to win like that. And a lot of that, good credit to Notre Dame. Their infield defensively was really, really good. There were a couple balls that could have gotten through, could have proved to be RBI hits. That didn't turn out to be the case. And then one last thought kind of on the other side with the pitching. The bullpen does a good job of eating up innings. Ben Joyce gives Tennessee, I believe, 3 1/3, throws the most pitches he's thrown out of the bullpen. And then Wyatt Evans gets a couple outs. Camden Sewell comes in to finish things off. But at the same, pitched towards the end of the game. I guess he didn't finish things off. Tennessee didn't win. But at the same time, Camden Sewell, I believe, throws 21 pitches. He should have enough in the tank to be able to turn around and throw a pretty, not start, but throw a pretty good, sizable relief outing on Sunday if Tennessee makes it there. So I think when you look at it that way, it's kind of, I said it in my post-game story, it's kind of a tale of two different things. Tennessee lost this game. How did it set itself up for the rest of the weekend? Good on the pitching side of things. Joyce isn't going to be able to go, but Joyce really hasn't even been their most relied on guy for most of the season, most of even the back half of the season when they've expanded his role. On the other end, you have your best hitter and a really good defensive center fielder, which I don't think you can undervalue that either. Will not be in the lineup. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do because they moved Seth Stevenson to center, put Jared Dickey in left. Obviously that foot makes him a little bit limited. It's a lot different going with Jared Dickey, a great batter, and saying, all right, we'll live with his defense in a game when you're down 7 runs, then it's going to be tomorrow when you have your best pitcher on the mound in Chase Dollander, and you have 9 innings, and you can't just think about the hitting. And I think behind Jared Dickey, there's a decent drop-off for production level at the plate from the guys who else could start in center field or left field. Maybe they keep Stevenson in left and put someone else in center. Yeah,
it is kind of interesting to think about, I remember Coach Vitello, whoever it was, talking about throughout press conferences, hey, he can take an at-bat, we can get him in the game, but they were a little bit hesitant on, saying a full game, right, a consistent stretch of innings. Now it looks like they're pretty much going to be in a position where they have to do so that's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, it is, and it doesn't help them out that John Michael Bertrand, Notre Dame's ace, who will get the ball tomorrow, is a left-handed pitcher. Obviously, Gilbert is a left-handed batter too, but Gilbert's really good. I mean, there's really no drop-off with the righty-lefty splits. Jared Dickey, he just doesn't have a ton. He's not bad against lefties, but not a ton of plate appearances on the year. And the other guys that could be Christian Scott, Kyle Booker, all lefties. So that's not a great matchup for Tennessee to have to face a lefty without Gilbert. But it'll be interesting to see. This Tennessee team has responded all year. I wouldn't count them out. And it's pretty cool. It's going to be best on best. Chase Dollander versus Bertrand. It should be a great game and a lot of fun. Defense. Notre Dame's coach really put an emphasis on, he thought that was the difference in the game.
Did.
I think when you got those 2 pitchers on the mound tomorrow, that's going to be really big. Tennessee's defense has not been great the last 2 weekends. Notre Dame's was fantastic tonight. They need the Vols need to tighten things up for tomorrow.
I really like what you said at the beginning of this whole show. Notre Dame kind of came out and they punched Tennessee in the mouth. And that is that's an interesting thing to see because frankly it just does not happen very often. In fact, this was Tennessee's first loss in 11 games, but the Vols are going to look to rebound tomorrow afternoon right here at Lindsey Nelson Stadium, 2:00 p.m. Eastern time. So afternoon game, going to be under the hot sun. I'm sure the stands are going to be packed and wild once again. Even had Peyton Manning right there behind home plate in the crowd. So lots going on right here. Any quick thoughts on tomorrow's game before we close this thing down?
No, I think I hit most of them there in that last subject. So it should be good. It should be interesting. John Michael Bertrand, another transfer, a former Furman guy. When the Paladins shut down the program a few years ago, has come over. And he's been their best arm all season. So it should be really interesting to watch.
All right, well, let's wrap this thing up and close it down tomorrow. Tennessee and Notre Dame for Game 2 of the Knoxville Super Regional at 2:00 p.m. Eastern time. For Ryan Schumpert, for Rick Butler, you've been listening to the Rocky Top Insider Instant Reaction.